Star Wars Outlaws was a game that launched at the tail end of August last year to some decent reviews, but nothing that blew us out of the water. And the general consensus was that this game was just another Ubisoft title, but this time with the Star Wars IP slapped on it. I ended up being a little bit higher on things, particularly the story, but the more and more I played, the more and more I saw how the gameplay faltered, and at times there were a lot of small annoying issues within the combat and some of the game's core systems. Well, the main focus of the video here today is going to be talking about the two story expansions, Wildcard and A Pirate's Fortune. I will also be taking a little bit of time to talk about what Massive Entertainment have been up to in terms of updating and changing the game's core systems. So if you were a fan of the base game and maybe you're still a little bit on the fence, hopefully after this video you have a good idea what to expect. And that season pass is going to run you about $40, so I want to make sure that you have the best idea possible. And if it's worth jumping back into, Star Wars Outlaws.
Oh yeah, we go way back. She still owes me for that game on Batu.
Right. Of course I do. Let's, settle up after I win. You. It was your message I got.
You? I am not you. I am the great Captain Hondo Onaka.
Okay. Do you have a crew coming to break you out?
As my dear mother used to say, never is a man more free than when he has been betrayed.
So that's a no.
I am in between crews right now.
Right.
As I do with all my reviews, I like to talk a little bit about the performance, and I'll keep this one short because the complete technical breakdown is on the full video that I did for the game, which I will go ahead and link on the screen now. But for the most part, I ran a mix of ultra and high settings at 1440p with ray tracing enabled. The first story DLC, Wildcard, ran great and I encountered zero issues while playing through, but unfortunately the same can't be said for A Pirate's Fortune, which saw me crash twice at the start and then once in the middle half. So the performance on that second one might be kind of iffy. Take it with a grain of salt. And as always, it's best to look up a few videos with comparable specs to yours so that you can see what your performance would be like. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about what Massive Entertainment have been doing to improve the core gameplay experience. Because when the game launched, there were a lot of odd choices like instant fail stealth segments, or the inability to carry enemy weapons up and down ladders. Or the biggest offender to me was the inability to freely shoot off your speeder when traveling around in the open world. All these things that I just mentioned have since been added to the game. There are a large group of people that aren't really going to see these improvements because they played the game at launch and they bounced off because they got their fill. More often than not, games have the most amount of players playing them when it first launches. So that initial release and how the game played back then is how most people are going to think of it. Now, if anyone new picks up the game, it's great because they are getting the best and the most complete version of the game, but in all honesty, this should have been how Outlaws launched at the start. And it's become a bit of a trend within the gaming community the last few years where games will launch feature incomplete and then patch in normal gameplay elements and call them updates. While I'm happy for these updates, I do wonder if it's too little, too late. Next up is the first story expansion titled Wildcards. Here in this DLC, Kay, Nyx, and ND5 team up with everyone's favorite gambler, Lando Calrissian, where you're tasked with entering a high-stakes sabacc tournament in order to win a map to a secret moon. What follows is a 2 to 3 hour adventure that sees you mostly going through existing areas within the world, but a new one or two sprinkled in throughout. Kay is initially tasked with retrieving that map for Governor Thornton, an Imperial official who looks to blackmail Kay into doing so. That first hour or so is going to be mostly talking, getting your way in, setting up that whole tournament setting. And it's actually on a ship called the Morania, and once that tournament begins, the ship actually jumps into hyperspace so that no one can interfere with the games. And after all that work, all that setup, the actual sabacc tournament itself is only like a 10 to 15 minute segment, which is, it's really cool how the environment's set up, how it's presented. It's like a gladiatorial arena. I thought they did a good job at that. And then also the back and forth as the characters drop in and out. I do just wish that there was a bit more of a tournament setting or a round setting because it felt like it was over pretty quick. We all know that nothing ever goes according to plan with Kay and Lando, and they have to find a way to steal the map on their own accord. And this part, I imagine, is where a lot of these stealth changes are going to be very welcome, because there are a lot of times where I was worried about having to restart a whole section, and thankfully, you don't have to do that anymore. If your cover's blown, you can just start blasting. And after successfully stealing the map, Kay in turn gives it to Lando, who in turn gives it to the Resistance. So sadly, you don't ever get to go to the moon on the map, which was something I was hoping we would get to do. Out of the two story expansions, this one was probably the one that I liked the least. Not because I thought the story was bad, I actually liked the story, but in terms of gameplay elements and what you'll actually be doing here, it's the one that just felt more samey than the base game. And the actual big ticket event, the Sabak tournament, is only 15 minutes or so out of the whole 3-hour experience, so I thought that was a bit of a miss. Although it was nice to see Lando again, I do wish it was just a little bit longer. There is also a few skin packs that you get access to with the purchase of the Season Pass, which can be picked up from the crate in the loading bay of the Trailblazer. The outfits are pretty cool. They do have a few perks if you do wear the full set, but more importantly, they can all be transmogged. There's items for your speeder, your ship, outfits for Nyx as well, but personally my favorite is the one that turns you, or is at least Boba Fett inspired, and I thought that one was probably the best one. Don't go out here and drop any money on these. I don't think they're worth it. They're more just a cool incentive if you pick up the Season Pass. And then we have the most recent addition to the game in the second story expansion, A Pirate's Fortune, which sees you teaming up with Hondo Ohnaka, who I briefly remember popping up in the animated Clone Wars TV show, and I know he plays a prominent role in the animated show Rebels as well. I do also want to note, in order to play this story DLC, you will need to have finished the base game. Right out the gate, I'm going to say here in Pirate's Fortune that you do get access to a new star system to visit and explore, but unfortunately there's no new planets for you to roam or explore on. Instead, most of the missions are going to take place in or around the asteroid ion storms of the Kepi system. Early on, Kay is thrown into jail, her ship's disabled, and this is where she ends up meeting Hondo Ohnaka himself. Him and Kay hatch a plan to escape the prison and steal the pirate's treasure. Obviously, it's not going to be that easy, especially when Hondo's involved, and I was pleasantly surprised to hear that they brought back Jim Cummings to do the voice, because he slipped right back into that role.
Not have to follow your orders, Kay.
Hey, come on. It's not an order. We're a team.
Some advice, Captain to Captain. You do not get rich worrying about doubters and naysayers. Your fortune is for you alone to seize.
You cannot seize anything if you are dead.
The enemies that you're going to be fighting this time around are a new faction called the Rakana Raiders, led by Stinger, which is nice to have a new enemy faction to fight, but they're essentially just a reskin of the regular Raiders from the base game. There's no new enemy types, there's no new weapons, so that is a bit of a missed opportunity. Arguably, the biggest addition with this expansion is going to be the Rakana Raider ship. This is something that you get access to as part of the main story. Once you finish that main story of A Pirate's Fortune, you'll be able to go dock at one of the space stations, and you can see that the ship is there, and you can go ahead and take it for a spin. The only unfortunate part here is that you can only use it within the Kepi system. There are things that you can exclusively only do with that ship, like grabbing containers. You can fly through the storms a lot easier. So it is a bit of a missed opportunity, I think, to not allow us to take that outside the system. Now, the Trailblazer isn't completely useless in this area, because you do find a new vendor that sells all new ship parts that are focused on helping you survive out in those ion clouds outside, as well as a few other minor ship upgrades and charms that you can outfit yourself with. I, for one, liked the second story with Hondo a lot more than I thought I would, because the gameplay elements, but I also felt like the character of Hondo was fun to bounce off Kay's optimistic self and sometimes naivety. Then you've got ND's more serious side to contrast it all. There is 3 endings in total for this DLC, but they all end with some variation of a base being blown up and then Kay and Hondo going their separate ways, with her and ND setting out on their next adventure. So after laying it all out here on the table, do I think that the Season Pass for Star Wars Outlaws is worth it? No, I do not think it's worth it if you're paying full price. When you combine the total playtime of these 2 story expansions, you'll come out to around 6 hours of playtime, and for $10 more, you could buy Expedition 33, which is a phenomenal game, or you could buy like 3 copies of Balatro. The point being is that these story expansions are fun, but looking back on it, I do think that waiting for a sale on the Season Pass is the right move moving forward if you want to experience these stories. While the cast of returning characters like Lando and Hondo are fun to see again, they really don't do much in terms of driving Kay's narrative forward as a person, and they certainly don't build on the ending of the base game. If you were a fan of that base game and haven't jumped in since launch, do you think that the stealth fixes or the ability to shoot off your speeder is something that would bring you back, or are these story DLCs what's drawing you in? Or is it too little, too late? It does look like that Massive Entertainment will be moving on from Star Wars Outlaws with the release of this second DLC, as all the Season Pass obligations are fulfilled now, and they'll be putting all their efforts into the Division 3, which entered production last year. So hopefully, if you're still watching the video, you have a good idea of what you'd be looking at if you do decide to pick up that season pass for Star Wars Outlaws. And if you did enjoy the video, consider dropping a like and subscribing so you can catch all my upcoming reviews and previews in the future. And as always, if you did make it this far, I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day, and this has been my review for the Star Wars Outlaws Season Pass. Thank you for watching.
The weapon's ready.